The Line 6 POD Go is a really spectacular, affordable, do-it-all style platform, and Line 6 has continued to make this product better with new firmware updates. And so with all of that said, I think it's worth revisiting this unit, taking another look at how we set it up, and making sure you have everything you need to know to feel comfortable with your POD Go. So with all that said, let's dive in. Right up at the top, we've got our on button. And then right up here, we've got our view button, which is going to allow us to go back to our home base. Basically, if you are ever lost, this is the button you want to hit to take you back to someplace familiar. And then we've got this action button over here on the right, which allows us to navigate, drag, drop, move our different effects blocks throughout our signal chain. And then we've got this little top button where we can go ahead and use that to engage or disengage different effects. Then if we hit both the view and the action button at the exact same time, this is going to give us the ability to go in and save our preset, rename it, or move it to a set list or to a different bank. Down at the bottom here, we've got page left and page right, and this is going to allow us to navigate through our effects. So quick little tip, anytime you see these additional dots, that means there's an additional page that we can navigate within that effect. Then from here, we've also got this encoder knob, and this is going to allow us to browse through our different effects. You can also click on this and it's going to pull up our entire effect library. We'll talk about this more when we dive into how we actually edit a preset on the POD Go. Over here, we've got our volume knob, which is going to control our overall volume and our output coming from our POD Go. And as we move towards the bottom here, you're going to see that we've got 8 foot switches. Now in this case, these foot switches are all mapped to different effects blocks, but you do have the ability to use this mode toggle, and this is going to take us to different modes within the POD Go. So this is our snapshot mode, and I'll talk more about this later, but basically it allows us to move between different snapshots or adjust multiple effects blocks all with one click. Or if we hit both the foot switches here, this is going to take us to our preset mode, which then allows us to quickly and easily move between presets. And then once I hit that mode button again, now I'm back in my stomp view. And this is typically what you'll use, or the snapshot view, when playing live, just for the quickest and easiest access to engaging or disengaging your effects. Then over here in the bottom right, we've got our tap tempo, which acts as our tap tempo, or if we hold this down, this also gives us our tuner. We always want to make sure we are in tune because no one likes an out-of-tune guitar. And then of course, over here on the right, we've got our volume/expression pedal. If we click this view button and we look at our actual signal chain, this is where we can see what this is specifically mapped to. So for this 65 amps preset, we've got it set to a volume and a wah. And if I click down on this, this is what engages the expression 1 part of my preset. And lastly, you'll notice these 5 knobs right here. This is what's going to allow us to easily and quickly edit our different effect parameters within each individual block. And of course, if you are finding this video helpful, be sure subscribe to the channel. It definitely lets me know what content people find valuable, and then that way I can make more of it for the future for all of you. Now to start, I've got my 65 amps preset right here, which is a free Tonecraft preset. You guys can download that on my website. Simply just go to the link down in the description. Plus, I have some other really awesome presets that you can purchase to help get you started on your POD Go journey. Okay, so if I want to edit my signal chain, this is where we can hit that view button to get us into our effects view. And right off the bat, one of the most common questions with the POD Go is, can you change the effect layout? Now, one limitation to the POD Go as compared to, say, the Helix is you are mostly locked into the navigation or how this signal chain is laid out. In this case, you will always have a volume, a wah, an EQ, and this effects block right here. Now, we do have the ability, if we simply just click in that, we can engage or disengage or use our action, and we do have the ability to navigate or put this elsewhere. Now, one thing people often do not know when they first get this unit is actually all the way on the left here, we do have our input, and all the way on the right, we have our output block. And this allows me to turn on a noise gate if I would like that at the start of my signal chain, and therefore eliminating one extra block that I could need. Now over here, we've got our volume. And since this is going to be a typical Voxy kind of compressed style preset, I started with a compressor. And like we talked about, if I do want to go in and make adjustments to this preset, I can do so here. If you actually click on these different encoders, this is going to take you back to what is called the user default. So whatever is the saved default for this specific effect, it will automatically go back, or again, you can just use this knob to dial it wherever you want. Once again, this is where my page left and right is going to be so handy, and this is what's going to allow me to see all of the different parameters that I can edit within this specific effect. As we move along here, let's say I don't want to use the Minotaur distortion, I want to change it to something else. This is where we will click down on this little button right here, and then if I use the top encoder knob, this is what's going to let me move between different effects libraries. If I want to stay within distortion specifically, that's where I'll just use this bottom knob right here. And then we've got our heir apparent, and we can go in and start to make adjustments from here. Now, if we like this preset and everything is exactly where we want it, all we have to do is hit save. And then this is what's going to make sure we can save that specific preset and we don't then lose any of the adjustments that we just made. Okay, so now let's talk about snapshots and how we actually add effects to our foot switches. Once again, if I hit the view button here, this takes me from our signal chain to our stomp mode. And we can quickly and easily see now, if I click on these different foot switches, it will engage or disengage each of these different effects. Now, let's say I want to go in and I want to change where these effects are mapped. All I have to do is hit both of the page buttons at once, move to the bypass control option, and what you'll see right here is the parameter, the switch, and then this learn button. The parameter option is going to allow us to control what we do when we actually click the foot switch. So bypass just simply means turning it on and off. In this case, it is mapped to foot switch 4. If I move this, you can see very quickly and easily where that shifts to different foot switches. Now, one thing that is cool, if you don't know what foot switch it is, you just know like, hey, I want it to be this one, click the learn button, then click that foot switch, and it will automatically choose the correct foot switch for you. Now back to the parameter function, this is where I can go in and I can actually control different parameters within that effect using that foot switch. So in this case, if I wanted to control the gain, the tone, the level, I could choose to do that through my foot switch. So this could be really helpful, especially if you want to do something with maybe a reverb or a delay, where you want to take it from being, moderately wet to this huge, massive soundscape that has just tons of reverb and delay. Now let's move on to my favorite part, which is talking about snapshots. Now this next section is what I am most excited to share with you because I use snapshots all the time when I play live. I personally find them the most helpful. And if you're not familiar with snapshots, basically it is a function that allows you to go in and turn on or disengage multiple effects, amp parameters, effect parameters, all with the click of one foot switch. So just to practically show you what this looks like, we can navigate to our snapshot mode by hitting mode. I'll show you the view just so we can easily see it here. If we hit both the preset options at once, now I am in my snapshot mode. So what this looks like is, a little camera lens with a 1, a 2, 3, and a 4. The way I've set up my 65 amps preset, which again, you guys can download for free, is we have our clean section here. We have a verse, we have a lead, and then a chorus. So if I go in and I hit my chorus, you'll notice up here at the top that multiple things turned on or off at once. So in this case, if I click into my chorus setting and we go in and we actually look at, say, the distortion, and we go from lead to the chorus, I've actually mapped it so my gain and my amp drive also automatically changes when I go to a new snapshot. So theoretically, when you're playing live, you've got a huge chorus and you're about to jump into a lead, you want a little more compression, overdrive, and overall volume. That's where you can kick this on. And again, allow yourself to engage multiple effects parameters all at once. Super cool and something I use all the time and honestly think you should too. Now you can technically do this from the POD Go, but my recommendation is to actually do this from the desktop. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the desktop app just so we can see what it's like to edit on the edit software. Now we see this little snapshot icon up here at the top. It's super easy to make adjustments. All I have to do is simply click into whichever snapshot I want to edit. In this case, you'll see that my overdrive and my delay kicked on at the same time. If I want to map something like an effect parameter to that snapshot, all I have to do is just click on this little controller icon on the left, toggle to our snapshot, and what you'll see here is now when I go to my lead tone, that mix automatically adjusted from there. So all I would have to do is go in, make the adjustment to what I want it to be, and now you'll see when I go back and forth between my different snapshots, that mix parameter will specifically be saved to lead snapshot. Of course, once we're done, be sure to save, and then that way, any of these effects that you have left on or any of the different effect parameters that you've chosen to edit, you can easily recall those the next time you pull up this preset. And we have finally made it to the last section of this video. Do not give up on me yet though, because now we need to talk about some of those preferred menu settings that you guys should have when getting started with your POD Go. Now to access our global menu, hit both the page buttons at once, and you'll see global EQ and global settings. Global EQ is just that. It's going to allow us to assign a global EQ. No matter what guitar we put into our POD Go, it will have the same EQ parameters assigned. In this case, let's say I always want a low cut filter. This is where I can go in and cut everything below 70 Hertz. Now, that is recommended for guitars. If you're a bassist, don't do that. In this case, now, if I go in up at the top and use this encoder knob, you'll also see the ability where I can go in and use this to adjust. Maybe I want to add a little low end boost or I want to add a little bit more of those mids. I can do that here with the global EQ. Once again, hit both page buttons to get back. Now we've got our global settings. And this is where we can go in and set up all of those preferred settings that I had just talked about. Right off the bat, you see 4 different options: the ins and the outs, the preferences, switches and pedals, and then our MIDI and our tempo. And the ins and outs section is gonna control all of the inputs and the outputs coming from your POD Go. In this case, if you want to add a pad to your guitar, if you want to adjust and have a line or an instrument level going out, this is where you can go in and do that. Now, for the most part, I don't think you need to make any adjustments here than what is already defaulted within your POD Go. Now, once again, when we see those 2 little dots, that means I can page over. And the only thing that you may want to change is this volume knob if you want it to control just the amp going out or all of your outputs. So in this case, up at the top here, we have different outputs. This volume knob can control either just some of those or all of those. Now we have our preferences tab, and this is something where I would go in and make a couple of adjustments. The link, amp, and cab, I typically leave that on. The snapshot edits, this is where I recommend leaving it to recall. What that means is if you bounce between different snapshots, you won't lose the settings that you had just set up if you did not save that preset. So as long as you're within the same preset, but adjusting between different snapshots, it will recall those edits. The tempo pitch, I recommend changing this. The authentic option means that if you use the tap tempo in the middle of a song, you'll hear this super weird like as the tap tempo and your delays kind of ramp up to the correct speed. So I like leaving that to transparent, that way nobody hears that weird sound. Over here on the right, now we've got our switches and our pedals. And once again, I don't think there's much we have to do here. If you do not like the auto foot switch assign parameter, you can turn that off. By default, line 6 will automatically map to a specific foot switch as you start to add things into your signal chain. Most of the time that's not an issue, but if you don't like that, you want to do it manually, you can turn that off. And then one thing you may want to change is this stomp mode between 4 switches or 6 switches. What that means is when we are in stomp mode, if we leave it at 6 switches, the up and down bank buttons could be used to map effects to. However, if we turn this to 4 switches, it means we can only map effects to these A through D foot switches, and then this will always take us up and down our different banks. And then as we go to the second page here, most of these things you will not need to touch unless you have an additional auxiliary foot switch or pedal. And then lastly, maybe one thing you would want to change, the switch LEDs. If you don't like that this shows up in kind of a light color, in the instance of like, say a delay, it would be a light green, you can turn that off. I prefer having this on because then I know what effect is mapped to each of these different foot switches without having to engage it. The tap display, we can also go in and choose. Maybe we don't like it tap tempo and we don't like seeing that. We can go in and adjust these right here. And lastly, we've got our MIDI and our tempo. Most people do not need to make any adjustments here unless you are integrating with something where you're choosing to receive or send out MIDI signals. The only thing I would say you may want to do is where it says tempo select, you can go in and if you want your tempo mapped to snapshots, your preset or global, you can make that adjustment here. If you switch to a new preset, it will always reset the tap tempo. Versus if you leave it at global, you just tap tempo, beginning of a song, doesn't matter what preset you are on, it will always stay the same. And all in all, the POD Go is a really incredible unit. It sounds great, it's easy to use, set up, and ultimately it's a really great budget option for anyone that wants a live rig, recording rig, or just something to practice with in their bedroom. So if you want more POD Go content, check out this video right here. I will see you guys next time.